Hello and welcome back to the Futurism at JHU podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas, joined with co-host Ricardo.
What's up?
And we also have Eric here today.
Hi.
He's a computer science freshman on the pre-med track and also potentially E&M minor, so he is a triple threat.
Hello everyone. I'm excited to be here. It's actually my second time recording this podcast, but it's my first time being in the studio, so I'm kind of nervous, but yeah.
You'll do great, Eric.
Yeah, I think.
So today's topic, actually Eric came up with, and that's looking at net zero carbon emissions and the future of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And climate change is one of those things that is really an existential problem because, unlike any other technology except maybe like AI or nuclear weapons, which are also existential threats.
Yeah.
Climate change is one of those things that it's here and it's threatening our very existence on this planet. And so I think it's super important to talk about. I'm really happy you proposed the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it'd be really cool, because people always like throw out these numbers and these stats about climate change, and it's very hard to connect with that a lot. So I wanted to kind of look on the NASA website and pull up some stats on climate change and just kind of visualize how it's changed over the past few decades. And so I'd like to pull up the NASA website. So NASA has some really cool stats. They've been tracking the climate, for decades now. And so first, like looking at how carbon dioxide has changed, you can click on this one and you can go like explore this yourself too. We're not going to go through everything, but really cool website. So here we can see carbon dioxide. It's gone from 380 parts per million in 2005 to over 400. Now it's almost at 420, only a couple decades later. So that's a pretty dramatic change for just a couple decades. If we look at this slider here, we can see that in 2002, we have pretty, like basically what it's doing is it's showing how intense the like carbon dioxide amounts are. And so you can see that over time, 2002, it's pretty yellow. And then if we go through the years, we can see it gets more orange and then even more orange. So you can see that's a very intense change. And then when we go to 2022, it's like red.
We're being smugged.
So yeah,
by carbon dioxide.
We're being smugged by carbon dioxide. And so clearly, we're seeing that our, carbon emissions are having, very strong impact on the atmosphere. And, basically what carbon dioxide is doing, for any of you who like don't know, is essentially it's called like a greenhouse gas. So it essentially like traps heat in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And so that causes, the warming of our planet. And so that's what people are talking about with global warming. So that's a perfect segue into global temperature. If we look here, 1880, if we start at like 0 essentially, so it's like a relative change, we see that now in 2020, we've increased by 1 degree Celsius, which depending on if you know Celsius or Fahrenheit,
it might not sound like a lot, but
it might not sound like a lot, but it's essentially like 2 Fahrenheit, almost 2 Fahrenheit. And so imagine like you have a fever, right? Your normal body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Essentially, the planet has a 2 degree Fahrenheit fever. So it's sitting at 100.6 degrees Fahrenheit, essentially. And that is not a happy place to be, right? Yeah. Like think to the last time you were sick. There's a lot of stuff going around right now. A lot of people are sick. A lot of people have fevers. And fever's no fun, right? Because your body's basically fighting an infection. And so the planet is basically, fighting an infection, which is essentially human activity, which is slowly, destroying the planet and making it unhealthy.
And also, like, one more thing is, like, this is a change, an average change in temperature, like, all over the earth. So, like, some places might have not changed at all, but some places would have, like, had a lot more change than that.
Yeah, actually, here, I can let you go through this one. Uh-huh. If you want to look at you can see how different parts of the world, we're going through this slider here from 1884 to 2021. And you can see how it's
you can even see some like hotspots here and there.
Yeah, you can see, so like there's some hotspots like up north. So it's interesting how it's kind of varied over time.
Yeah. I mean, some of it
stuff
does
in
obviously
Asia.
have to do with like
North America.
anywhere from like, different seasons happening all the way to like just different ocean currents and just air currents that are sort of like propagating this heat over the entire planet.
Oh,
But as you can
wow.
see,
Look at that.
yeah, it's getting hot. Yeah.
That is a dramatic change, like 2012, 2013. Wow.
Yeah, and very quickly too. So
That's intense right there. So you can see, look, like the red up there, that means 4 degrees,
yeah,
4 plus degrees Fahrenheit, like up north. So that's why we're having so much of like the melting of the ice caps, which I guess we can look at that next. So we can look at
Ice sheets.
ice sheets. Yeah, so there's also sea ice sheets.
yeah. So all of these stats are like very connected. All of them.
So let's see. Arctic sea ice extent. So we see it's gone from 7 million square kilometers down to under 5. So it's decreased by 12.6% per decade.
That is actually
I actually
insane.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a ton.
That's very dramatic. Oh, you can see in the slider too. Wow.
Just a visual representation of it.
So I guess if you want to see that again, so this was 1979. That's what it looked like. And then if we skip straight to 2022, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
So basically 7 to under 5, that's like almost a 50%.
Yeah, and the thing you might not realize
Or
is that it's talking
30,
about
40% decrease.
million square kilometers. It's not a tiny amount. It's a lot. It's like a lot. So even though the numbers might not seem like that big a deal, looking at it in millions of square kilometers, that's a lot of area that's been melting. It's just gone now.
Yeah.
And which, as all types of water do, they end up in the sea.
And also like that is like habitat for a lot of like wildlife. out
Yeah,
there. So,
exactly. Like you've seen all the videos of like the polar bears.
Yeah.
Like just having not a good time at all because this is their home and their home has shrunk by, 30, 40%.
Yeah.
It'd be like someone goes into your house and just like rips out the bathroom, rips out your room, and then you're left with like the kitchen and like living room, right? Essentially, it's, almost half your habitat is gone. And so the sea ice, so you can see like everything is connected, right? So the global warming has caused the sea ice melting, and then the sea ice melting has caused, which I'll look at next, sea level rises. So it's all connected. It's all like one big interconnected problem that's going on. And so we see the rise since 1993 on the top right. You can see that's 102.5 millimeters, which 102.5 millimeters, that's essentially, let's see, what is that conversion? Math. You guys CS majors, help me.
Metric system. Isn't like 100 millimeters?
I think that's 10 centimeters, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So that's like, what is 10 centimeters like? So if a meter is like this much,
Yeah.
10 centimeters,
Yeah.
which maybe doesn't seem like that much, but I'm guessing it's probably a lot more than
It's pretty bad, especially when you look at how many houses are built in close to the beach, right? So it's not just about the sea level rising, but it's also about how much more erosion due to the sea levels increase there is. So one problem that I remember hearing about in one of my classes back in high school, which was my marine science class, was just how kind of stupid it is to like build houses straight up on the beach just because of how much erosion there is, to the point where like a lot of houses are structurally just not sound in case of a hurricane or something. Like they'll immediately be gone, and then the next thing people will do is just rebuild it exact same spot again and again, which is not great obviously because you're wasting materials, and then you're also putting the people who live there at risk. So it's not great. So all these sort of things factor into what we see here: sea level rising. It might not seem like much, but water is able to do things to Earth. Just look at the Grand Canyon as an example. So if you think it doesn't do that much damage, it kind of does.
Also wanted to point it out again, like average can be deceiving. Like this is like 10 centimeters on average.
Yeah.
But for some places, like especially at low places, like I think I heard people that had to evacuate their homeland like maybe on islands to other places because their homeland was sinking due to like global warming.
One of the examples that Professor Ehrenheim, one of my professors for computer science innovation and entrepreneurship, so one of his favorite places on Earth is Venice. But as we all know, due to sea level rising and a whole bunch of other stuff that is specifically related to Venice, Venice is slowly sinking. And so, again, you don't even have to look that far out to see many examples of these things happening. Just, I mean, look at your local coasts and see how those people are managing things. Like, it's a wild ride if you really look into it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. As you guys were talking about that, it just reminded me of how distanced. The thing about climate change is there's so many people who are so distanced from the problem, right? Like us, for example, like, we're students at Johns Hopkins, we're kind of in our, Hopkins is also a bubble in a sense, but we're so isolated from all these problems. Like, we're not living in these places that are, experiencing the flooding, like literally having to evacuate, having their homes destroyed. I mean, we've had some severe weather, just recently.
Oh, crazy.
Like in Florida, for example, with the hurricane. And, there's been a lot of, very natural disasters, essentially. And so I think that's, it's like part of the issue is people don't have that like personal connection to it, and they don't realize the impact of, I guess, the impact of their decisions on climate change, and also like, because they're not the ones being personally affected, they don't feel like that urgency to like do something about the problem. So I know we've kind of talked about the problem now, and I think it's also important to, now that we've discussed the problem, think about some solutions. I know in like a previous, or like a conversation we had a while ago, we were talking about is basically like sustainability and climate change. Is that something that should be solved at the consumer level? Like, should it be individuals like making choices in their daily lives and that kind of mitigating climate change? So it'd be like, just trying to live a sustainable life, maybe eating more plant-based foods, trying to conserve water, converting to like a hybrid car or electric car, more sustainable options in your life. Or is it something that the government should be responsible for, right? There should be that top-down. So it's like, it's a bottom-up approach versus like a top-down approach going from the government. Should it be the government's kind of prerogative to, create the policies that is going to drive, positive change and like help us like slow down, global warming and climate change? So I think that's a question I present to you guys. Like, is the solution the top-down approach? I mean, we've just had elections. We're just having elections right now, and that's a huge issue, right? Because there's a lot of candidates who are climate change and global warming deniers, and who are in big oil's pockets and stuff like that. Then there's others who are like super on board with like climate change and sustainability, and so like just like voting in different people is going to have a huge impact on like the policies that are put out there. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think it's should we have a more top-down approach, a bottom-up approach, maybe somewhat both? Like what is the solution to this problem?
Well, I think it should be like a combination of both. But well, on the consumer level, well, people know that we need to save the climate and we have to buy more green products. But in reality, it is really hard, especially if a green product is more expensive than the other, then people might just want to buy the other one. And then, so it's really hard for individual consumers to make decisions only on green, climate change, sustainability. So I think it should be more of a government level change. But I think there are some exceptions to it. For example, Tesla, like the government didn't really try to make like green cars, like EVs, at like before Tesla came out. But Tesla, they got a model that is already attractive to consumers. Not that only it is an EV, but as a car as well. So I think that is an exception. But I think most of the time, the government level change should be made on that level more than consumer level.
Yeah, I think very similarly as well. I think there is obviously an aspect to it. One of the things that I'm thinking of is just how harmful the fast fashion is to the whole climate crisis. One of the reasons is it takes so much effort to be able to develop the fibers to be able to make clothes out of. And then you have the whole processing that goes into it, right? So not only growing the material and actually managing, but actually, you have to cut it, you have to go and print it. There's a whole bunch of steps that happen to it, and it's very bad usually for the environment. That's why you see a lot of people that are for reusing or upcycling clothes that you may already have and buying obviously quality clothing. And I feel like that specifically it could be a thing where it just might just sometimes be cheaper just to go thrifting, right? It doesn't take that much more effort. Well, a little bit because you actually have to scrounge through a whole bunch of things. But you're able to save and upcycle a whole bunch of clothing which would otherwise just be thrown away. And usually the worst part is that a lot of the times they're shipped to like third world countries, or now they have to deal with the problem of having all these like random clothes in there. Other options could be using, different plants or different materials for clothes. One of the things that I don't think a lot of them use, or I'm not exactly sure if it's outbanned or not, but like the use of hemp, right? So, basically like marijuana, weed. So like that plant, sure, there are some negative connotations for it, but the big factor in here is that it's able to grow really easily and almost anywhere. So you're able to grow, actually, like I believe the first hot air balloon was made out of hemp. So you can sort of see how strong and how durable the material is. And it's extremely easy to grow. It doesn't require as much water as some of these other fibers do. So it's a good solution that some people could get behind. And I also believe that there is some government regulation because, as Eric said, some people just don't have the funds to live a certain way, right? If you're, having to save up or make sure that you're not spending too much so that you're able to meet payments or whatever for the next month, you might not be able to spend those 10, 20 extra dollars on your shopping for more ethical source of food or for more climate friendly options to the stuff that you already buy. So I personally believe that the government also has sort of a big part to play. Maybe not even necessarily like strictly telling companies, oh, you have to do this, but maybe providing incentives, right? That'll outweigh the negatives of buying other stuff. Maybe, and I believe the government did do this a little bit for like companies like Ford to develop EVs and sell them because they would get an incentive, a monetary incentive out of it, be it like a tax cut or some type of incentive that would make it easier for other people to purchase these products, which would ultimately, help the environment and not be as harmful. So I feel like Eric said, there is very much the part of you can play if you're able to, but at the same time, go to your government officials and vote the way you want, so that the government is able to sort of do something about this whole situation. Because at the end of the day, the major polluters are the big companies, and even if we do a whole bunch of this stuff, if we don't demand it from the companies, obviously they're gonna keep doing things the way they've done it, just for the sake of it's easier, and they're probably saving money without having to develop anything. So that's just kind of like my 2 cents on it.
That reminded me, when I was in high school, as part of my school's like environmental club, called like the Green Team, and there was one story that reminded me when you guys were talking about like price, and like kind of consumerism. Like we're such a society of like consumption, right? Like people are always obsessed. Like when you mentioned the fast fashion, also did a project on fast fashion, like the
Yeah.
environmental and like social impact of it, and it's really really harmful, not just to the environment, but like the whole like factories and like the way that workers are treated within those factories, and like there's a whole bunch of like human rights issues with them too. um, but we're such a society of consumption, and we don't realize that, keeping up with the current trends, or wanting to consume and buy new stuff, like it's really having a huge impact, like on the environment and on other humans as well. And it just got me thinking of the story that one person told in my club, and that was, I believe it was her grandfather. This was one of the members of the club. Her grandfather was like a super. There's this word like called minimalism,
Yeah.
which is basically being like a minimalist in your life, like not using more than you need to, like being very like frugal essentially, and just like focusing more on like quality over quantity. And so she gave the story of essentially, like she wanted to go for a drive. She wanted to drive her grandfather to, I think, like the mall or the grocery store. And he was like, no, I don't really want to do that because I don't want to spend the money on oil, and I don't want to have to, waste basically I don't want to spend the money on oil, and I don't want to waste the oil in my tank. And like, let's go bike instead. So like an example of like that is like, thinking about the daily choices in your life where you can take a minimalist approach, where you can do something that's cheaper and easier, and that's also going to help the environment, right? So like biking instead of driving, or walking instead of driving. And so I think that could be an interesting like consumer sided approach if we can kind of change the narrative around society being a less consumer based society and being a more minimalist based society. Obviously that's a big ask, but I think it could be done, and I think people will be happier for it, because I think this pursuit of consumption is actually very unhealthy. I think that people who are kind of happier with having less, essentially, like not having to chase every trend, or always be buying stuff, are actually happier people. Ironically, maybe that's a little that's a little bit of a hot take, but that's just kind of where I stand on it. One more thing I'll mention. Sorry, I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but one more thing I'll mention is food. And I know we've talked about the future of food.
Yeah, very recently.
But one thing that I'm very, very excited about, very passionate about, is lab-grown meat. And I did a presentation on this in my oral presentations class. Mm-hmm. But I think lab-grown meat could be a huge, huge, huge positive solution, because not only are you allowing meat eaters to still eat meat, right? Like I like my meat. I was basically, vegetarian or trying to eat more plant-based for like 2 years, and I've kind of shifted back to more meat eating, unfortunately, just for like health reasons.
Right.
But like, I would 100% eat lab-grown meat. I think it's, you're still getting that taste, you're getting that texture, you're getting the protein, but it's without the environmental impact, it's without the animal impact. And so I think that to me is one of the most promising innovations of the century. If we can get lab-grown meat out to market and we can get consumers to adopt it, we can get the price cheaper than normal meat. That is going to have a huge, because agriculture and like food farming, essentially animal farming, has such an environmental impact. It's like unbelievable. And like not having to kill the animals as a bonus, that's great. So that to me is like probably the most exciting like innovation that's kind of under development, and I hope we can get that kind of to market. It's starting to come to market slowly but surely. Still really expensive right now, but I think in the next 5-10 years it could potentially be up there, and people will start buying lab-grown meat.
Yeah, I think that's actually interesting. Actually, one of my cousins who lives in Mexico, I think he very recently started college in Mexico, so congrats to him. And I think as his major, I think he's doing agricultural engineering. So it'll be very interesting. Hopefully, when he gets a little more knowledgeable about all this stuff, it'd be cool to just like have a conversation with him about this kind of stuff. He only speaks Spanish, unfortunately, but maybe we could have like a translation like afterwards, or I could translate, and it'd be cool to bring him in, because
awesome.
He wants to be sort of like a farmer, be able to grow food and really manage it really well. So I think he would be an interesting person to like bring later on when he's a little more knowledgeable. And I totally agree with the whole lab grown meat, because I also love, as someone that works out a lot, you need a lot of protein, and it's sometimes really hard to get it just from plant-based foods. Some of the most protein-dense foods out there are just, meat in general. And I think the fact that like meat itself has grown so like industrialized is also pretty bad in my opinion, because at the same time, we have all these issues with like the animals, of course, but also the fact that like maybe we're eating too much of something that we are not supposed to eat that much. Like I love my bacon, but we just kind of have to acknowledge how much fat bacon in itself has, which bring about its own like issues here and there. I'm actually a big proponent also for like hunting. One of the reasons is because you're actually having to work for the food. Like surprisingly, some of the most like environmentally headed people are people that are always out in the wild doing things, which includes a lot of the times hunters, fishermen. Those are the people that genuinely want to protect the environment, because that's the place where they spend the most fun. If there were no animals to hunt at all, what's the fun in being out there? If there's no fish to catch, then being a fisherman is kind of not great. So I think also thinking about these people and how they think about the environment is also like a pretty good thing to have in mind, just because like these are the people that are always out there and have probably the wildest experiences and are probably most knowledgeable on their local like ecosystems.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that. And also, on top of lab grown meat, I personally haven't tried it, but I think one of the most major factors in producing methane is actually cow fart.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then like agricultural has like really negative impact on climate change because of that. So I was thinking like there are also more like solutions such as like GMOs or like other crops that can be grown without using less carbon. And also like I think I read it somewhere. I think it was in Bill Gates' book about like avoiding climate disaster. I think people are currently researching ways to genetically make a cow to not produce that much methane.
I saw
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Really,
think
that's a thing.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
so I think that's also
Eliminating the fart gene.
Yeah.
The methane gene.
yeah. So I think that's also a good
That's
solution.
really
If
interesting.
it can be like actually be done. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't realize a lot is like how much carbon dioxide and methane like animals produce and like animal farming. You know, you normally think of like factories and cars as like the main, you know, CO2 emitters, but it might honestly, I mean, I'm sure there's stats out there. It might honestly be animal farming like as one of the top producers of like greenhouse gases.
Mhm.
So that's just an added bonus of if we can get more lab grown meat. I think from what I'd done in my research, I think it's basically 90% decrease if we do, because like obviously when you're producing the lab grown meat, basically what you're doing is you're like taking some animal cells, you're culturing them in a dish. A huge benefit of that, you're talking about the fat and bacon. A huge benefit of lab grown meat is you can control the amount of fat that's in it. So you can have very lean, very healthy meat. And so that's a huge benefit for like just health, because actually that reminded me, there's a video of this company that actually had 3D printed meat. And they basically you basically go to this machine. I mean, it's like very thin, very small. So obviously they're gonna, you know, have to you know, make it more, you know, cheap to make. But you could choose the amount of fat that you wanted. You could choose what kind of slice you wanted. And I think that would be really interesting. Like having consumers like 3D print their own food and having the amount of fat content and protein content that they want in it. That to me is really, really cool.
Bodybuilders would be amazed at
Oh,
this.
yeah.
I already know.
Because they, you know, they want the protein, right? They don't really want the
Yeah, they're super meticulous about
content.
yeah, especially
Yeah.
if you're competing, you want to have everything tracked and be exactly as you want it. So having that level of precision, especially because when you're having a competition, you kind of have to, you know, leverage all these different things at once. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think lab grown meat is very, very promising to me. I think the one hurdle will be consumer adoption.
Yeah.
And obviously price. I think price will come down. Like with any technology, it starts very expensive and then it goes down as, you know, there's more competitors and there's more developments.
Yeah, I think
But
the major, at least for me, the major thing is just like taste and price, as you said. Like
Yeah.
I want to be able to afford something, and at the same time, I want to not miss out on the quality of like the taste of
Yeah.
the food. That's
Yeah.
the main thing, and we see this with like alternatives to meat, right? So like the Impossible,
Beyond Burger.
Beyond
yeah.
Burgers, stuff like that, where it's trying to imitate as much as possible the taste of meat, but sometimes it doesn't quite get there. So the adoption isn't there just based on the people that like have grown with regular meat hamburgers and just know the taste. I think that's one of the things. The meat itself and like the taste isn't bad, but it is definitely different. And I think that's the main hurdle that's setting at least that back. It's just the fact that since you can't necessarily replicate it 100%, people are less willing to like actually eat it on a regular basis because they want the taste of it. Same thing with like turkey bacon. You could eat turkey bacon, but it's not the same as regular bacon. Like it, you know, it's similar, but it has these different like textures and like flavors where the transition isn't always like very smooth.
Yeah, I think that's another benefit of lab grown meat is
Precisely.
it's meat. It's actual meat. Like it's not, these imitations like Beyond and Impossible, which I would add actually are pretty dang good in my
Yeah,
opinion.
like
Like I've
in their
tried
own
them.
right.
They're pretty good. I mean, it's not exactly the right thing, but if you kind of like trick yourself into it, they taste pretty good. So like anyone who hasn't tried them, I would definitely like try it at least once and see how you like it. But yeah, lab grown meat, I mean, there's nothing to trick you with because it's truly meat. It's actual, muscle cells, muscle fibers from, a cow or chicken or whatever. Um, so I think, in terms of taste, I think we'll get there in taste for sure.
Yeah.
It'll just be the price, and then also there's probably going to be some hesitation of like, oh, this was grown in the lab. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure there's going to be a little hesitation there, but to be fair, like we've kind of messed with all our foods before. Most foods are genetically modified in some way.
To some degree.
Like, if you're eating cereal, like all of those cereals like General Mills, it's all genetically modified, ingredients going in there. And so, we're already messing with stuff, but I feel like this is one of the things where we're messing with it in a way, but we're also doing it for good. Like we're saving animals and we're saving the planet, and we're, allowing meat eaters, meat lovers to still eat their meat without feeling guilty about it. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, lab grown meat is not the only solution, but I think there's, it's one step in creating a brighter future. And I think a mix of, us as consumers trying to be more minimalist,
Yeah.
right? Like just thinking about where can we kind of take a more minimalist approach, be less, consumer focused, and thinking about that on a personal level. And then on a, more societal and political level, trying to put the people in power, with the elections, try to put the people in power who are going to care about this issue and who are going to put the policies forward that are going to force companies to, mitigate their CO2 emissions, to adopt more green technologies. And I think that mix of consumers being more, cognizant and minimalist, and then, the government putting restrictions on corporations and forcing them to be more green, I think the combination of that is going to really help us push us in that direction that we need to. Really, in the next few years, I mean, the UN had that stat of something like, in like the next, I think they said in 2020, we have like 10 years to really make like a big push to like get this under control before it kind of goes out of reach. So according to them, we have like 7-8 years left to like 2030 to really make a big change. So yeah, we kind of have to start now.
I think they're trying to do it by 2050. Like
2050.
achieve net zero carbon emission.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's gonna be really hard.
Yeah.
Even though we act now, because we're currently using fossil fuel for our cars still, even though EVs are growing, but there are currently like big car companies that won't like that change because and then it's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of people who don't want that change also. And one more thing is like as Nick mentioned before, the decision makers in our political world are not people who came from like the areas that are severely impacted by climate change. So I don't think, well, in my opinion, climate change should be more done in like people from those areas should like speak up more maybe, and then talk about like how they were impacted and how it can also be a story for them, for us as well. And yeah, that's
Yeah, I agree with that, especially because like one of the things we don't think about, but it's like a very clear example, is just air conditioning. It is so mass spread here in the U.S. Every house that you go to, every mall, every store, AC, always there. But if you just go down south and cross the border into Mexico, as soon as you get there, literally like 5 seconds after you cross the border and go into someone's house, there's no AC to be found. There's AC maybe in like a few public buildings or maybe like in a store or something, like a big place. But like most people don't actually own ACs. Like it is very rare. And what they have to do is just kind of use fans and just open up the windows. And that's what we would do. Like back when I lived in Mexico, just open up the windows, letting all the fresh air try to come in. And so just thinking about that, like what would you do right here, right now, if you didn't have access to AC? Like, same thing with heaters, space heaters. We don't really have that in Mexico either. So a lot of people, especially in the U.S., are kind of shielded from the effects of climate change because they have these commodities which allow them to sort of be unfazed by it. Where if you just look down south, it's the complete opposite, where you're just, having to brave either the cold or the heat by other means. So, like I said, just talk to your neighbor and you'll probably find out like many more examples of that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because we're talking about this before, but like AC is one of those things where you use the AC because it's warm outside.
Yeah.
And it's warm because of climate change. But when you use the AC, you're actually contributing more to the problem because you're releasing, carbon. And then it's just this whole like cycle of, it gets hotter and then you use more AC and then you use more AC, it gets hotter. So it's like this never ending cycle that's just like propagating the problem. And so, yeah, I think, to everyone out there listening, like just think about what's like in your power, to control. Like maybe right this second, controlling what the government does is kind of difficult. Obviously we can influence that, through elections, voting the right people into power. You can do that by, emailing and calling representatives, trying to push them to do things. I mean, even running yourself, eventually if you want to get into politics, you can be the people in power to make these changes. And I know we just had like
our first
Gen Z, literally 25-year-old, I think Max Frost is his name.
I think so.
Maxwell Frost or Max Frost, which is incredible. And yeah, I mean, that is like the coolest thing ever that we actually have a Gen Z, like the youngest person in Congress right now. And I just think that's so cool. And it shows that, we're all, around 20-year-olds, and like that could be us in 4 or 5 years. We could literally be, a representative, and we can create policies that we want to see. But, until then, like, I challenge all of you to find one thing in your life, like one small change that you can make today or this week, whether it be maybe you eat one plant-based meal this week, or you try to cut your shower time by a little bit, or, you try to use a little less AC or a little less heating. So I would challenge all of you out there to like find, one small change in your life that you can make, right now. And, you may not think like it's much, but if you can do it, then other people can do it. And if we can get more people to do it, it's a compounding effect where, it starts with one person, starts with this, us right here, and then you can help other people make those changes as well. And we can create a ripple effect that can have a really, big positive impact in solving this issue. So yeah, thank you, Eric, for proposing this topic. Really, really cool topic. Always love talking about this. I think it's really important to talk about and think about, and also, not just complain about the issue, because it is an issue that's very easy to complain about, but also think about what we can do about it, because at this point it's more about, we know it exists and we have to push for solutions. And so yeah, I think the future is bleak and bright at the same time.
Definitely.
And so hopefully we can push it to more the bright side. But yeah, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks, Ricardo and Eric.
Yep.
And we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.
See ya.